Well, our first guest is seated and ready to go, and she's Ibironke Adeagbo, a chartered accountant who harbours a deep passion for reversing the conditions at the root of Nigeria's out-of-school children's scourge. Good morning, madam. Good to have you in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's talk about the subject that is so dear to you, out-of-school children. At what point did we move from one of the worst in the world to the very worst in the world? Because I know that there was a UNESCO report last year for 2022 that says that, hey, it is no longer 10 million out-of-school children in Nigeria, but in fact, 20 million, putting us ahead of India and Pakistan as the most affected countries. Does it look like we're getting it really bad and the situation is getting worse? What are the issues and where are we really?
Okay, so just to put it into context, we've always had out-of-school children in Nigeria. It's not a new thing, Predominantly in the north, right? And nobody paid attention to these children, And that's why we're having so much insecurity challenges now, because those children have grown up and they have no skills to sell, so they are not economically active, so they are resorting to crime. So it's no surprise that we have serious insecurity challenges at the moment. So it's been ongoing, right? However, what's now compounded the issue is obviously with the kidnapping of school children in the north. Parents are now actually literally withdrawing their children because we all know what's happened with the Chibok girls, Dapchi girls,
Dapchi.
So any right-thinking parent in the north or in those regions will be apprehensive sending their kids to school. So there's been so much withdrawal, enrollment has gone down, and that's made the number of out-of-school children double overnight, you see. So that's the reason. So it's like a vicious circle. The out-of-school children you didn't take care of years ago are now creating insecurity challenges that is now increasing the number of out-of-school children. So we can't afford to look away. We've got to tackle this head on.
It's really worrying, because the sub-Saharan African region also it's the region with the most out-of-school children in the world. How do we begin to reverse this problem?
Right. For starters, our politicians need to have the political will. Because as far as I'm concerned, the political will is not where it ought to be. I mean, if I was the president of this country, the out-of-school children will be a standing agenda in our weekly FEC meeting, in terms of monitoring it, to making sure it's going down, monitoring the trajectory. Because it's like, yes, we talk about out-of-school children, but there are no pragmatic solutions in terms of how we intend to tackle it. It's like a very fanciful subject to talk about, but what are we doing about it? I'm quite hopeful because I was looking at the agenda of the presidential candidate, and the president-elect's manifesto is saying they're actually going to set up a parastatal to actually tackle out-of-school children, because just subsuming it out under the Ministry of Education is not doing much to it. If we have a separate parastatals, because when we had problems in the Niger Delta, right, we set up a commission for the Niger Delta issues. This is now a big issue. We should set up a parastatal for out-of-school children to be able to tackle this problem head on.
Now, I mean, is that the pragmatic solution that you are referring to? Is it just that separate entity to tackle this type of menace? I mean, what about the private sector and all of that? I believe that you also run an NGO, and only recently you were, I believe last year, you were appointed on the board of the international charity called Street Invest, correct?
That's correct.
And it exists to improve street children's lives around the world. How has this, helped in creating this type of atmosphere to try to help out?
Interestingly, I was hoping you were going to ask me the question, how did I get into this in the first place? Because I'm a chartered accountant. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I work in the UK. I'm based in the UK. And I work in the education sector as a director of finance in the educational sector. And in the UK, the way you get your funding for education is based on recruitment and retention, right? You have to recruit the kids, and you need to retain them. So if you recruit them and you don't retain them, you lose 50% of your funding, right? So I, as a finance director, to enable me balance my books, I need to make sure we are oversubscribed, We've got maximum, students on roll. And also to make sure even when we enroll them, we keep them in class And they start and they finish the course. Otherwise, the government will claw back our funding. So I found myself trying to make sure if there is any out-of-school children on the street in Britain, I try and encourage them to come to our schools because I'm looking at it from the money perspective. And then I'm going around to the teachers telling them that, please, make sure you teach those kids well. They start and they actually finish, and you actually impact knowledge in them. Because if you don't do that, we're going to lose the funding. So I'm coming from the balancing the books perspective. However, when I come into Nigeria and I'm going around, during school hours, I see lots of kids on the streets. And I'm thinking, it became a moral dilemma for me, thinking if I'm trying my best to get every British child into school in the UK, and I come to my motherland and kids are roaming the street, I've got to do something about it. So I went back to Britain. I set up a foundation called Ibironke Adeagbo Foundation, predominantly to help reduce the number of out-of-school children. So we raise funds from the diaspora. Just last month, we had a big fundraising event. We raised about 24 million naira, and we're bringing that across. What we then do is we go on the street. When we see kids out of school during school hours, we pick them up, take them to their parents, ask why are they not in school. It's usually poverty. And we are saying, you know what, we will pay their school fees, buy their books, buy their shoes and everything. So you have no excuse not to send them to school. So far, when I last checked, we've picked up about 100 kids from the street, paying their fees, making sure they remain in school. So that's where all that is coming. So we are trying to supplement what the government is doing. Because to be realistic, the government cannot do everything. So I want to encourage more NGOs who are in the similar space to come together to help the government to reduce the number of out-of-school children.
Well done.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one. Well done. But, you know, the problem to me, it's deeper than picking kids on the streets, particularly when it affects the northern out-of-school children that you mentioned, and you made a reference to insecurity. At the heart of insecurity in the north is the Boko Haram scourge. What is Boko Haram? Education. I take that to mean Western education is bad. You know, Boko Haram. Thankfully, President Muhammadu Buhari at the time came out to say that they don't know what they're talking about. How can education be haram? Education is good. But then this is deep-rooted. And connected to it is part of the multi-dimensional poverty that we are talking about. Some just can't afford it. Some are afraid, like you have listed. And the issues are huge. How can we go beyond just having a unit, like the president-elect has promised, a unit that may not be able to penetrate the core north, for example, you know, because of the religious and the customary, traditional things that are holding a few people down. But it's also not just a problem of the north. Bayelsa, oil-rich Bayelsa, is listed as one of the, you know, worst hit states in Nigeria. And you'll be wondering, how can Bayelsa have out-of-school children? What's your take on the listing of Bayelsa State as one of the worst hit?
Clearly, again, as I mentioned, the out-of-school children in the north is a good feeder for Boko Haram because they're idle, they're not going to school. So, you know, the Boko Haram guys just give them peanuts and, you know, they recruit them. So if those kids were in school in the first place, they will not be attracted to Boko Haram. And what is Boko Haram talking about? The guns they are using was produced
it's a product of Western education.
Who had education. So what are we talking about here? So clearly they don't know what they're talking about. And again, we need to look into people's mindsets. We need to reorientate people to make them understand education is one of the best things that anyone can give anybody. You understand? It takes you out of poverty, improves human capacity, human development capacity in the country. It ticks all the boxes. So education is absolutely critical. Now, talking about the north, Borno is one of the worst affected states in the north with regards to Boko Haram. Boko Haram has decimated that state. But you know what? I keep saying this, that I dove my heart to the governor of that state, Professor Babagana Zulum. He's a professor, so he has appreciation for education. You need to go to Borno now. The guy has changed the whole state. He's built lovely schools, you know, brilliant educational infrastructure, new shiny IT devices. Even he bought bicycles for children to go to school. In
Maiduguri or all over?
In the state, mainly in the state.
No, I mean just in the capital city or everywhere.
What he has done is, one of the things we recommended, because we had this security summit, and one of the suggestions is that we have so many schools in ungoverned spaces. Close down those schools, open mega schools in the town centers. So you have lots of students on the premises that even when Boko Haram comes, the kids will actually overwhelm them, So I think he's taking on some of this advice. So most of these schools are in the town centers in my Borno, And what he's also done is any parent that doesn't send their children to school, they're in trouble. You understand? So I want to recommend that every governor or new governor-elect should actually go and borrow a leaf from what he's doing in Borno. That will go a long way. Talking about the North again, we work all over Nigeria, and we noticed that there are lots of out-of-school children in IDP camps. No education whatsoever. The reason they are there again is because of insecurity. So we actually went into those IDP camps. We went to Nasarawa State. We brought teachers, books, and everything. We went in there to actually start teaching them there, took the education to them there, brought the books to them there for them to start getting some learning. Now, I don't think an NGO ideally should be doing that. The government that's put them there in the first place should think, hang on, they are kids here. They need education. Provide a school for them within the IDP camp. So, but the point I'm making is that government can't do it alone. We are here to support the government. The government should engage us, to make sure we can work collaboratively to reduce this number. The number is too high. We are one of the highest in the world. It's embarrassing. Yeah. We really, really need to wake up. Otherwise we're sitting on a ticking time bomb.
Bielsa.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, again, it's about leadership. I mean, if the leadership of that state has an appreciation for education, then it will take that seriously and make sure there's huge penalties for parents or guardians that don't send their kids to school. So it's about leadership.
And another concerning issue is beyond out-of-school children, it's the quality of education that's also being provided in Nigeria, because it's one thing to run schools, but it's another to ensure that quality education is there. And the World Bank has noted that Nigeria is experiencing learning poverty, with about 70% of 10-year-olds not able to read a sentence and not able to put simple numeracy tasks together or solve simple numeracy tasks. Why is the quality of education in Nigeria so poor, and what problems does this create? Because it's one thing for governors to build schools, provide teachers, etc., but clearly we have a serious issue when it comes to the quality of education that is being produced.
Right, okay. So in the process of recruiting teachers, I would imagine that process, in my opinion, should be very robust. Teachers should have the relevant qualifications before they become teachers or before they become recruited or before they are recruited. Now, I'm sure you guys in your profession and in my profession, there's what we call CPD, continuous professional development. The fact that you've qualified as a teacher or as a journalist or as an accountant, your learning doesn't stop there. Learning is continuous. So they must make sure they have procedures in place to make sure even after recruiting those teachers, there's continuous professional development for those teachers. In the UK, there are 5 days in an academic year where the school is shut down and it's purely for training of the teachers. 5 days in an academic year. So Nigeria could borrow relief for saying that as well, that, 5 days out of the whole academic year is training for teachers. Because if you want them to train your children well, they too need training. And I think Governor El Rufai and the governor of Edo State, what's his name
Obaseki?
Now? Not Obaseki. Before him, the former chairman of
Oshomole.
They had an exercise where they actually went to interview those teachers, and those that were not up to the scratch, they lost their jobs. Yes. I know it's a difficult decision to make, but it's all about trying to improve the standard of education, because garbage in, garbage out. If you don't train the teachers, they'll just imbibe, knowledge that is not relevant to the kids, and we are none the wiser for that.
Yes. I mean, just going back to out-of-school children, I know we discussed the children in the north. I wanted to just zero in on the Amajiri children, which account for about 14 million out-of-school children. Majority of them are boys. I mean, I believe I saw one of your reports where you had the former CBN governor, Sanusi Lamido, who also donated to your foundation. I don't know if you have some sort of relationship with him and, in terms of just conversations with the 19 governors of the states to try to have these children come together and go to school somehow.
Yeah, so as I said, we had an event, a fundraising event in London on the 18th of March, and he was one of our speakers. And as we all know, he's a champion for out-of-school children. He's always going on about it, that the North needs to do something about these out-of-school children. And I think he became unpopular, because of that. But he's persistent about it because he knows the impacts of these children not being in school. My personal opinion, and he's a very good mentor to me as well, because we share this passion to reduce the number of out-of-school children. However, my view is that these children, this Almajiri, they go to Islamic schools. So they learn. So they have the capacity. They have the intellect to learn. So if they can learn Islam, they can learn Western education as well. And both can go side by side. I mean, even Christians, they go to school Monday to Friday. On Sunday, they go to Sunday school, So religious education and Western education can go side by side. It's not one or the other.
More global education, in fact.
Exactly, absolutely.
Exactly.
So the northern leaders choose actually come together and actually, maybe have a conference, to say, what, the two must go side by side, and let's work together to make sure we achieve this. Because it's making the North backward when their kids are out of school and not getting education, and the South, most of their kids are being educated. It creates a two-tier nation where, they haven't got the skills, we've got the skills, and then we start having all these issues, the economy and things like that. So, we need to make sure we balance it and we sort of pull them up by their bootstrap to make sure they get education.
How much of this do you think we can attribute to overpopulation, especially lack of a deliberate attempt at family planning? The last time that we had something concrete from government was under Ibrahim Babangida thing, the family planning, 4 children to a family. Nobody's talking about that anymore. So you have people within the multi-dimensional poverty cycle, but then who are saying that children are gifts from God. Indeed they are, but then people can feed rearing children that they really can afford to have, 4, 5, 6, 7 sometimes. How much of this is a factor in these out of school children, menace?
Personally, I don't think Nigeria is overpopulated. We're just over 200 million. India is 1 billion. So I know they too have their issues and their challenges with out-of-school children. But I think it's because we haven't got proper planning in Nigeria to be able to forecast, to say, in X number of years, our population will rise to this number, so let's make enough adequate provision. So if we are doing that, then, because sometimes population is an asset. I mean, people are outsourcing work to India, because they've got the population, In London, when I want to phone my telephone company, it's someone in India who is answering my call. And it's because they've got the population, if you see what I mean, and they've got the infrastructure. I wish, all those jobs could be outsourced to Nigeria because we've got the population as well. However, the important thing here is that I don't believe in controlling, the number of children you can give birth to. If you can afford it, go for it. If you can afford 10, go for it. But where I find people irresponsible is when they have children and they are thinking other people should be responsible for training those children.
That's just the point.
That's
unacceptable.
Beggars believe. It's like, take responsibility for your actions. I mean, when I arrived in the UK a couple of days ago, some of my family friends or colleagues and drivers, they were so excited to tell me, oh, my wife just had a baby. My wife just had a baby. And I congratulated them, saying congratulations. And then it's like they're looking at me that there's more to come. And it's like,
who are you going to give?
I need to give them money. Hello? I wasn't involved in the activity. Why should I be responsible?
I didn't ask for another child to come into the world.
Come on, we get to act together. So if you can't afford it, then don't go for it.
Yeah.
You've got family planning things you can do to make sure you don't reprocreate every time you go to bed. So they should learn for that. And orientation, the government should orientate people. Because some of these people is illiteracy. They don't know they can, control birth and things like that. So a lot of work is on the hands of our government to do.
Well, all right. On that note, we want to thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Ibironke, for joining us on the Morning Show. Well done.
Thank you.
With everything
Thank
that
you.
you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
joining
so much.
us.
Thanks for
Thank you very
having
much.
me.
Well, all right.